relatively speaking, it is fairly calm. And I say that in the context of typically when a government in the Middle East falls, it tends to be absolute chaos on the ground, and we're not seeing that at the moment now. Broader context is that you have this sort of patchwork of various groups that control different bits of territory in Syria, and that is an ongoing issue. But in terms of Damascus itself and places like Homs and so on, there doesn't seem to be widespread fighting. It largely seems like the Assad regime, and particularly the army, just pretty much gave up.
Who could step into the power vacuum now in Syria?
Well, and that's an extremely good question. I mean, I think in terms of domestic players, again, you have this sort of patchwork of different groups with competing interests. So, for instance, up in the northeast, you have the sort of the Turkish-led groups that clearly are interested in some sort of autonomy. At the same time, you have the so-called Syrian National Army, which is the opposition, largely backed by Turkey next to it. Those two groups are opposed. HTS, very hard to say quite what its position is going to be going forward, because remember, the origins there is that it was an al-Qaeda affiliated group. Now it has since rejected that, and certainly in the last couple of weeks, most of the rhetoric that have come out of them, particularly in terms of the orders they've given, have then been trying to project this image of moderation, particularly explicit protection for minorities, explicit instructions not to cause widespread violence. And so far that does seem to be holding. So it's really something we're going to have to look at over the next couple of months about how these things develop. But right now there doesn't appear any one obvious party who could run the whole thing.
And so Israel has sent troops into the Hermon region of Syria. How significant is that?
I mean, it's significant only in the sense that the reason they're there is because basically the Syrian army pulled out of their side of the buffer zone, and Israel was somewhat or extremely concerned then that would create a power vacuum in that area, and that then potentially poses a threat to the Golan Heights. So what they did was to effectively move from their positions into the buffer zone and then into those Syrian positions on the other side of the buffer zone, really just to hold it and to secure the area, because Golan at the best of times is quite a lively area, and they want to make sure that in the ensuing issues that you have trying to establish some sort of stability in Syria, that they can at least control that particular area and protect the Golan Heights.
What about the broader Middle East in this, Stuart? This Iran was a key backer of the Assad regime. Of course, their proxies fighting Israel in Hezbollah and in Gaza with Hamas as well. I mean, what does this mean for the broader region?
I mean, I think there the question is who exactly is going to be kingmaker here in Syria. And so sort of going around the various actors, let's start with Iran. So, this is yet one more problem that Iran has to contend with. Its axis of resistance, the so-called axis of resistance, is much diminished from what it was a year ago. So you've seen Hamas largely diminished. You've got the same going on with Hezbollah, which in some respects is what allowed what has happened over the last couple of weeks in Syria to happen. The Houthis are still going, the militias in Iraq are still going, but Iran basically has a crisis in its long-held strategy of these various proxy groups that it armed and funded and could cause trouble for everyone. So that's something we're going to be watching the next 6 months. In terms of Turkey, clearly wants to establish either a buffer zone or just something to protect itself from what it views as the serious threat coming from the Kurdish groups in the south. Again, something we're going to look at, see what exactly that might look like 3 months from now. And then obviously you've got Israel itself that is very keen on making sure that any areas that it has near Syria are well protected, and that it doesn't then have what it is currently facing in Lebanon and Gaza, which is sort of militia groups posing a direct threat to Israel. So all of those players, I think, will come together. The one big one we haven't mentioned is Russia, which had an air base and a naval base in Syria, hugely important to Russia. Something I think we're probably going to see what happens in the next several days rather than the next several months in terms of whether that military capability stays there or they just pull out.